I'm Reshma Gopaldas. I am the Vice President of Video for She Media. I am also a 10-year breast cancer survivor.
Yeah.
I was the fourth and youngest woman in my family to be diagnosed, and my 10-year anniversary is actually this week. And just 2 weeks ago, I learned that I have some precancerous tissue, and my breast cancer is trying its best to come back, which I find rude. But I am, to celebrate the 10-year anniversary, I'm going to have a lumpectomy. Now, while I'm disappointed in that, I am so happy that I have a team of doctors and support around me who keep a better on my boobs than anyone I've ever dated, but that's a different panel. But today, I have these wonderful, wonderful women to discuss, not just the day that you're diagnosed, but what does it look like 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years and beyond. Think of them as the best bra ever, and I'm going to let them each introduce themselves, and we can get talking about what support looks like long term. All right, Paula, let's start with you.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you guys for coming, and thank you for having me. And I'm sorry you have to go through this again. I know how rough it is. I am Paula Schneider. I've been at Susan G. Komen as the president and CEO for the past 6.5 years. Never had been in philanthropy before, but thought that I would be a great fit for this organization because I am a breast cancer survivor. My mom died of metastatic disease. My brother died of prostate cancer. My husband carries the BRCA gene, and I have 2 daughters. So enough said. For me, it's personal, and I'm in it to win it.
Dr. Williams-Brown.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvette Williams-Brown. I'm a gynecologic oncologist at UT Health Austin and also an associate professor at Dell Medical School here at Austin. I treat patients that have gynecologic cancers, so anything related to the female reproductive tract, so I think about that as the cancers below the belt. But I also treat patients that are previvors, so those who are at high risk for developing gynecologic cancers, as well as other cancers such as breast cancer, typically for people who have a BRCA mutation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Beth Battaglino, President and CEO of Healthy Women, the leading national not-for-profit women's health organization that hyper-focuses on women in the middle, because we know that we do not take care of ourselves. So we are your best friend. We are going to hold your hand and make sure you prioritize your health. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Same. All right, guys, one thing you can say when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, the one part that's super overwhelming is everything. But Beth, I want to start with you. What can you do from day one and then down the line to make sure you have the support system that you need, not only with your medical team, but your friends and family as well?
No, I think that's such an important question, or great question, because when you hear the diagnosis of breast cancer, it's like a deer in the headlights. And what you need to do is take a step back and really think about how am I going to get through this? And when we've all experienced hardships in our lives, and we go to that one person that you trust to talk about it and want to share. So as you're thinking about this diagnosis, think about who you want on your team. And one of the most important person is your healthcare provider, making sure that you have that strong connection with that healthcare provider. And if you don't, it's time to make a second, you can go for a second opinion, and there's nothing wrong with that. And making sure that you invite, for many women, we feel like we're invincible and we can manage our own care, and we do not need any help. And with cancer, even with other forms of illness, we do need help. So identifying a support person that will be with you on that journey, making sure you have a good healthcare provider and a good healthcare provider team is so important. And knowing that there's other organizations that can help you, like the Susan Komen Foundation, like Healthy Women. We have the information, the resources. We will be your best friend, and making sure that we hold your hand throughout that whole journey.
That is a great point. One thing I always would tell people over the last 10 years is make sure you bring a friend to every appointment. And then when I had an appointment last week, my best friend called and she's like, I'm ready. And I was like, I got this. And then my surgeon started talking and I did not got it. It was not God. So, Beth, I want to talk a little bit, what does support look like for Komen? How do they support women? I know you guys have this amazing helpline. What are the other ways too?
Well, first of all, I do have my best friend right there who is also with me at every appointment because it was just too hard for my husband. But at Komen, we have a helpline, and it's a pretty amazing helpline. We have about 60,000 people that called our helpline last year, and those are people that mostly just start by saying, I've had a diagnosis, I don't know what to do, or I don't know how I'm going to afford this, I don't know, any and all questions. Or navigating, we have patient navigators that we also have that help people through their diagnosis and to ask the questions. Here's the questions you should ask your doctor. And bring a friend, because as soon as your doctor starts saying something that triggers you, you are off in somewhere else land thinking about it, and you don't remember. It's just like you, when you were talking about it, you literally don't remember what they said. So it's always really good for you to have support. And, our support is really, really, I would say it's very heartfelt. We have psychosocial workers that answer the phone, and we get everything from, I just got diagnosed with breast cancer and I'm living in my car. Or I got diagnosed from breast cancer, I can't afford rent if I lose my job. All of these things that are real realities for women that get diagnosed with breast cancer, and some men too, because for those of you that don't know, men do get breast cancer. And it's our way of making sure that we wrap our arms around you and take you through the journey so that no one has to go through breast cancer alone. So if you ever have a friend or, God forbid, get a diagnosis yourself, pick up the phone and call, because you will learn really, really valuable information.
That is a great point. Always pick the friend. It's a great way to turn them into your administrative assistants and not get criticized for it. And I picked a friend who was in school. She took the 8 pages worth of notes in every class. That's the person you want to get to. Dr. Williams-Brown, as you said, you focus on cancers below the belt. So when you get a breast cancer, or one of your patients gets breast cancer, how does that affect other parts of the body that you focus on? I mean, one of the first things I was told in the treatment, my oncologist said, pregnancy is not for you. It's too dangerous. And that is a very loaded statement and a lot to take in. So how do you support your breast cancer patients?
That's a great question. So many of the medications that patients with breast cancer take will affect the rest of their reproductive organs. So if a cancer is estrogen receptor or progesterone receptor positive, typically they'll be placed on medications that are intentionally used to shut down the ovaries, making it not possible to be able to have children, or at least at that time, or have a pregnancy that is safe, especially if someone's on chemotherapy. Also, there are things that can sometimes increase the risk of other types of cancers, such as tamoxifen. That's a medication that's commonly used in breast cancer that can actually increase the risk of uterine cancer. So when I see patients with breast cancer, many times it's in relationship to those side effects that have occurred from the medication that they're taking with breast cancer. And also, as mentioned earlier, for the patients that do have those high-risk mutations, sometimes we talk about actually having a surgery to remove organs such as the ovaries and sometimes the uterus to try to prevent the development of another cancer, even though a patient is currently going through breast cancer.
See, breast cancer is so fun. You get one solution, and then you're like, oh, I need to keep an eye on this. So, Beth, I want to talk about how can women be proactive about their breast health?
I'm going to steal some sound bites from the previous panel. It's understanding your family history, right? I think that's so important. And it's not to say just because you have a family history, you're going to get cancer. That's not true. But knowing that if you're at a higher risk, that could, that's really, really important. Preventative screenings. Ladies, we have 26 preventative screenings that are covered by the Affordable Health Care Act in place. So please prioritize your health and make sure you keep your annual women's wellness visit, including getting your mammograms, because we do know mammograms save lives. And making sure that, diet and exercise. I know everyone's like, oh yeah. But it's true. Diet and exercise, taking care of your whole body is so important. So those are 3 things that I would totally recommend as we think about preventative care and making sure that you take care of you.
Who here has had a mammogram? Just raise your hand. Who here needs to schedule their mammogram?
Okay, feel free.
Yeah,
Come
it's
on.
okay. Don't be shy. Who here has had their OBGYN appointment this year? Who needs to schedule one after a few years? I'll admit it. I'm behind on everything because this is very overwhelming, and all three of these guys are going to talk to me after. So let's talk a little bit about genetic testing. Who would like to speak to that and what's available and the benefits? Dr. Williams-Brown just gave like eyes raised. Anyone can. Is there a value to it? Is it better not to know? What are the benefits of it?
I can speak or at least start the conversation. So. Genetic testing can be extremely important for someone who has a cancer diagnosis because many times that can help lead or guide the types of treatments that are available that are tailored to the patient. There are, of course, other implications in terms of like family implications, whether that is your immediate family or like your cousins or other like second-degree relatives, but also for the possibility of any future children. So genetic testing can be very important. It depends on several factors in terms of whether or not genetic testing is recommended. So just because someone has breast cancer doesn't automatically mean they have to get genetic testing. But depending on someone's age or their own personal family history, as mentioned before, whether or not where the breast cancer is located, if it's recurrent, those are some things that would be factors that would determine whether or not someone has would be recommended to have genetic testing. And for patients that have ovarian cancer, which I know this is not what it's about, but those are patients who always are recommended to get genetic testing just because it's so commonly associated with genetic mutations.
Can I add on? Sure. I think knowledge is power. And as much information as you can have about your own medical background, your own health, then you can make these decisions. My mom died of breast cancer. I had breast cancer. She didn't, I don't know if she carried the BRCA gene mutation because they didn't test her at the time. I don't carry the BRCA gene mutations, which give you a much more higher propensity of getting breast, ovarian, or both. But you know, so I with two daughters, I asked my husband, who is Ashkenazi Jew, please go get the test because I just need to know for sure. If you don't have it and I don't have it, our girls don't have to be tested and I don't have to drag them through that. And you know, my girls were 25 and 27 at the time. And he got tested and he carries the gene mutation. And he didn't know it, but his sister had died of ovarian cancer. So to me, there was enough reason for him to be tested. And I think the statistics are, if you're of Ashkenazi Jewish descent, it's 1 in 40. And in general population, about 1 in 350. Okay, so to me, genetic testing is incredibly important. And then luckily, you know, my girls both were tested and didn't have or don't carry that mutation. I'm sure there's some other mutation that we may have because my mom, me, you know, and they got the wrong end of the cancer pool here, you know, from my kids. But it's important, just if you have any family history or if you have the opportunity to get genetic testing, to me personally, I think it's incredibly important because there's only about 15% of breast cancers that are related to the genetic testing of the BRCA gene mutation. The rest is random, right? So, you know, it's not as if, oh, okay, I don't have the mutation, that I'm clear. That isn't the case at all. We're still studying every other kind of mutation that's happening out there. And we have many, many different grants that we're working on. Komen always has about 250 research grants going at any given time. And some of them are specifically on that.
And if you're nervous about genetic testing, you're like, what do I do with this information? Just know, like, in my family, all four of us, my mother, my aunt, and my cousin were all diagnosed. I have a niece now. My cousin has 2 young daughters. And I remember a family friend who's a pancreatic cancer specialist said, you know, just because you're not BRCA gene mutation carriers, because we were all tested, he said there's another gene mutation out there. There's another genetic link. They just haven't found it yet. And of course, one of my niece was like, she's like, will it be named after us? I was like, well, you can only hope.
my God.
But that being said, she also thinks this way. You know, she's 17 and she was getting some hair treatment done. And I said, oh, is that supposed to be good for your hair? And she's like, well, Belle and I just want to, you know, while we have hair until we get cancer, we want to we want to style it.
Jeez.
But then she also said something positive and she said, listen, I'm hoping by the time we get it, I can take a pill and it'll be gone. And that's what we have to hope for, and that's why genetic testing is so valuable.
Yeah, when my 25-year-old recently, she's 28 now, but she just recently got the test results back, right? And I have been sitting on pins and needles, and I haven't been asking her about it, and I've been waiting. She calls me, and she goes, oh, yeah, by the way, Mom, I got my test back, and I'm negative, and I burst into tears. And she's like, you were worried? I'm like, yes, I was very, very worried. And she goes, oh, I wasn't worried at all, because if it happened, I knew I was going to get I was going to have my kids, I was going to get a mastectomy, I was going to have my ovaries out, and I was going to live my life. I mean, you know, to have to think about that as a young woman, you know.
So I want to talk a little bit, Dr. Williams-Brown, like what does menopause affect breast health and vice versa? And any of you can chime in. I want to start with Dr. Williams-Brown.
Sure. So menopause, the clinical definition is ceasing of menstruation for an entire year. So it's not like a hormone level diagnosis in terms of like measuring a certain test from your blood. But when this is happening, that can actually take years. So there are about 7 years, more or less, that can happen before the cessation of menstruation that can then be associated with things like hot flashes and night sweats and changes in your mood and sex health and all those things. And so menopause also can affect breast health as well. It does change our metabolisms. The breasts are less dense once you enter menopause, and it also the elasticity. So we don't have those perky breasts like we used to in our younger years. So menopause affects like your entire body, and it's the key thing though about menopause, and sometimes unfortunately people are sort of pushed into menopause early because of medications that they're on to block hormones. But menopause in general is not a disease, so it's not necessarily a negative thing. But of course, if it's happening before, like well before intended, it can have a lot of negative consequences.
Yeah. Who here gets hot flashes? Not for menopause, but just for fun. Okay. Wow, that was just a party of one there.
Yeah.
Okay, so Beth, I want to talk a bit about like what is it like to get diagnosed when you're younger versus midlife, and then also speak to what does support look like when you're younger and in the beginning. I always felt very alone. How does that change over time? And you know, 5 years down the road, 10 years, when you're still nervous about your testing, what kind of support groups are out there for people?
First of all, there are so many support groups now, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, we have so many different organizations that have different support groups for breast cancer as well as other cancers and autoimmune diseases. That's a really good thing. But for younger women, I mean, you can really speak to that because you're a younger woman going through breast cancer. You find your group, right? Mm-hmm. You find your people, again, making sure you have the healthcare providers in place, your team that's going to hold your hand, and your family support system or friends or whomever is in your group. As you get older, so midlife women, which is where my organization steps in, you know, some women are not diagnosed as early because, again, we're putting off our annual screenings. So, again, a gentle reminder, prioritize your health and take care of you, because if you don't take care of you, you will not be there to take care of your families. But, again, it's similar to younger, but you want to make sure you have that support group, you know, your friend, family member, whomever. Again, a good fit with healthcare providers. And then you have organizations, again, that are there for you, from financial, understanding cancer and finance, understanding your coverage. Health insurance is so important too. So every chapter of your life, you should really think through and make sure that you're paying attention to what your health benefits offer you. So if you have a higher family risk of cancer, making sure that you have the preventative screenings in place and that you're able to, you know, just protecting yourself financially is going to be important. Understanding clinical trials is important too, and participating. And what we're trying to do at Healthy Women is making sure that there's more investment in clinical trials. Clinical trials are representative of all women, not just white women, white, brown, black women, and making sure that people that are doing the clinical trial represent the people that they're doing the trials on is so important too. And then making sure you pick and choose your healthcare provider team in your hospital system is really important as well, and educating yourself. But making sure that you're going to credible organizations for your information, not just Dr. Google. Susan Komen Foundation, Healthy Women, and there's so many others that are really cancer care, that are really, really good organizations that have high, credible, and quality education information.
Yeah, I'll always get a friend to Google,
Right.
never do it yourself. Here's what I want to do for the last few minutes that we have. I would love for each of you to share a story of either a patient or a woman who's come to you with breast cancer that's really stayed with you, and then let us know one piece of advice you have for this audience when it comes to breast cancer and breast health. Paula, would you like to start?
Sure. I have encountered a lot of young women that have had breast cancer. And there was like a month ago, I spoke with 3 women that were 30 in 1 week that had just been diagnosed with breast cancer, which is so scary. But a lot of young women have the conversation with me because I was relatively young when I got breast cancer. I'm 17 years out now, and I had to tell my kids. And the challenge was really, how do you tell your children something like this? And so I thought about it, and I actually wrote a children's book. It's not going to come out till next year, but it's called Love Stays Strong. And it has these really sweet stories in this children's book about talking about how mommy or daddy might, and I didn't do it specifically for cancer, I did it disease agnostic because I wanted people to be able to tell their kids, mommy or daddy may not be able to pick you up from school or to make your favorite snack, but you have support and, like dolphins and, all of and they hang out in pods and you have your pod. And so, and all of it leads back to Love Stays Strong. So that was one of the things that I felt was like, I have thousands of stories, believe me, of women that I know that have had breast cancer and many that haven't made it. But for me, this one was one of like, how do you tell your children? And I came up with this little idea, nugget of an idea. I sold the book. I had a bidding war, and now next year it comes out. Amazing. And yeah, so
that's great. Yeah,
and all the money goes to Komen.
Amazing. Dr. Williams-Brown, guys, we don't have that much time left, but
Okay.
We can talk to people after.
Sure. So one story actually comes into mind, thinking really sort of a compilation of many patients, but I tend to see a lot of young women that are diagnosed with breast cancer in the context of BRCA mutations, and they're coming to me for counseling regarding whether or not they should then have surgery to have their ovaries removed. And I remember one woman in particular, but I've heard this several times before, that many people had a lot of sadness just because they felt as if their body had betrayed them. And they were very hesitant about removing yet another part of their body that could potentially go bad and have cancer. And many people obviously very wrestle with this because they're talking about their fertility, they're thinking about how is the rest of their life gonna look, how is that gonna change their relationships with their family, their love life, their sex life, their mental health. And I feel, I definitely see that struggle, and it's difficult. And as this panel is talking about, like, the cancer itself is not just the only thing that a patient is dealing with. It truly is. There's so many other aspects that can affect the rest of a person's life.
Yeah. Beth, bring it home.
I'm
You
going to
have a
bring it
minute?
home. 1 minute. I have a colleague, her sister is a previvor, and she was tested with the BRCA gene, had 2 little boys, had both breasts removed, and total hysterectomy, including ovaries. And what I found so powerful with her story and so many others is the willingness of her to share her story. And please know that you're not alone. There are so many women that are going through this, and the power of their journey and their experiences and the sharing is amazing. And that I think that's the biggest, win for healthy, being able to share your story and making sure all women have access to resources and information.
So everyone, go get your screenings if you can. Remind your friends and family to get their screenings because you don't want to join this club. But if you do join this club, it is the best supportive club you can be part of. And please give it up for these wonderful women.